is the Capitol Rundown.
I think it's very important right now, and the people require it of our elected officials, to act with civility.
We are listening to the American people, and what they're telling us is they do not want a rematch of 2020.
Default would be absolutely devastating for the American economy. It would cost us millions of jobs.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Siobhan Klemfer. Democrats and Republicans continue their high-stakes game of chicken this week as the nation moves closer and closer to defaulting on its debt. Many on both sides believe the nation faces economic disaster if there's no action on the debt ceiling by June 1st. Both sides were feeling better about the situation after talks earlier this week, but they broke down on Friday, with Republicans calling for a pause and saying talks are not productive. Here's Washington correspondent Basil John with the latest.
President Joe Biden says he and congressional leaders agree they will not let the country default.
Every leader in the room understands the consequences if we fail to pay our bills.
But time is running out to avoid the debt limit's June 1st deadline.
We still have a lot more work to do between now and the day we bring the legislation to the floor.
A key sticking point is the demand from Republicans to add work requirements for some safety net programs. President Biden says he's not open to major additions.
Not anything of any consequence.
On work requirements, he'd accept not anything of any consequence. Where does that
This is a senator who voted for work requirements.
But House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell urged the president.
Let's sit down in a sensible, responsible way.
Because it took the president 3 months to start dealing in reality, we now have a time problem.
While those negotiations proceed, House Democrats, like Connecticut Congressman Joe Courtney, are attempting to use something called a discharge petition to go around Speaker McCarthy and bring raising the debt ceiling up for a direct vote.
A number of us feel that we need to at least have another option available because the X date is fast approaching.
That petition won't be successful unless at least 5 Republicans join all Democrats. Because that's unlikely, other lawmakers say the only path forward is a sensible bipartisan bill. Reporting in Washington, I'm Basil John.
Well, here at the Rundown, we had the chance to talk to one of President Joe Biden's top economic advisors to get his take on the talks and how even approaching the debt ceiling deadline still means some economic pain.
There are no conversations about whether we should default or not. Our position is we absolutely cannot default. And the Republicans need to do exactly what they did 3 times under Donald Trump, which is address the debt ceiling in a timely fashion, without any fanfare, without any controversy, and make sure that the possibility of default is off the table. I mean, remember, the debt ceiling is about whether we pay the bills that we've already racked up. It's not about future spending. So this is really a question about whether we are going to be a deadbeat nation that runs out on our bills or not. And to us, the answer is absolutely not. We cannot be that country. And it's on the Republicans to agree with us on that. Separately, every year there are conversations between the White House and Congress about how much to spend on certain government programs, what we should be taxing certain corporations or certain individuals or households. And those conversations typically happen over the course of the year, and they're happening right now alongside this other process, and they're progressing quite well. I think the bottom line is that we are having productive conversations with congressional leadership, including Speaker McCarthy's team, about a number of issues related to tax policy and spending policy. At the same time, the president has made clear that while we have those conversations, we, the Congress, need to take the possibility of defaulting on our debt off the table. A default would be absolutely devastating for the American economy. It would cost us millions of jobs. It would permanently increase the cost of borrowing for the federal government. And it's not something we can play around with. I honestly don't think it's about who gets blamed for it. It's what's the main issue here is that it would be really bad for the American people and the American economy if we had a default. And that's why the president, since basically January, since the beginning of the year, has been saying we need to act, Congress needs to act to address the debt ceiling, to take default off the table. And he has been crystal clear on that for many, many weeks now. And we saw Republicans for many weeks refuse to do that, refuse to even put a bill on the floor that would address the debt ceiling. And then finally only did it a couple of weeks ago with basically a ransom note attached, where they were demanding 22% cuts to all sorts of programs like veterans medical care just as a condition for doing their basic job and making sure we don't default on our debt. So it doesn't really matter who gets blamed for it. It would be really bad.
While the White House might say this isn't about who gets blamed, the Democratic Party is already trying to make political hay out of the debt limit standoff. They're running a new ad in 6 states tying Republicans and their potential presidential candidate to the mess. Take a look.
You think the U.S. should default if the White House does not agree to the spending cuts Republicans are demanding?
You might as well do it now because you'll do it later.
The commercial tries to tie former President Donald Trump to what might happen if America defaults. The ad targets 11 congressional toss-up districts, including 2 in Michigan. When we come back, we'll talk about new developments in the race for Michigan's open Senate seat. We'll introduce you to some new candidates, and we'll tell you why there won't be any coronations in 2024. Stay with us. Rundown, we are keeping a close eye on the race for Michigan's U.S. Senate seat. There's a rare opening since incumbent and Democrat Debbie Stabenow announced that she plans to retire. And now there's a new Democrat in the race. Her name is Leslie Love. She's a former state representative who spent 6 years in the legislature. She represented Detroit from 2015 to 2021 when she was forced out by term limits. Love then went on to join the Michigan Natural Resources Committee. She says one of the reasons she'd make a good senator is her ability to work with people on both sides of the aisle.
I was appointed by both a Republican governor and a Democratic governor to special committees. And so that matters. I think it's very important right now, and the people require it of our elected officials, to act with civility. And I think my character speaks for itself. My reputation in the Michigan legislature says I'm one of those type of lawmakers.
Well, there are 3 other Democrats who have filed paperwork with the Federal Election Commission. Along with Love and Congresswoman Melissa Slotkin are Zach Burns, a lawyer who grew up in Genesee County but now lives in Ann Arbor, Nassar Beydoun, a civil rights and business leader from Dearborn, and there is a candidate committee for D.P. Throat. A phone number associated with that filing did not work. The FEC filings show as of March 31st, Slotkin has raised more than $3 million. None of the other Democratic candidates have reported raising any money. Slotkin also appears to be leading the way in endorsements.
I know that our future is really bright if we bring other politicians, other elected officials like Congresswoman Slotkin to the halls of power.
She recently announced the support of around 50 people that she has represented in Congress. The group includes a state senator, 5 state representatives, the mayors of Lansing and East Lansing, and other elected and community leaders. On the flip side, there are officially 2 Republican candidates in the race. There's Nikki Snyder, a nurse and member of the State Board of Education, and there's businessman Michael Hoover, who has roots in Jackson County and who you've met on the rundown. As of March 31st, Snyder raised about $60,000 and Hoover has raised about $30,000. And there are still a few high-profile and very wealthy Republicans who are thinking about running, and a famous actor who could join in on the Democratic side, so we will keep you posted. Well, coming up, we've spent a lot of time talking about Democrats and Republicans, but could there be another option on your ballot in 2024? That story is up next. A former Republican congressman from West Michigan is joining a new national movement to potentially create an alternative for the 2024 presidential race. Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic takes a closer look.
If the current polling data is correct, a majority of U.S. voters do not want a rematch between the current and former occupants of the White House. Given that attitude, Republican Michigan Congressman Fred Upton thinks the time is ripe for a competitive third party to challenge them both. It is called the No Labels Group. It already has $70 billion in the bank. But this Michigan pollster warns, not so fast. Is this real?
We need to be very careful about that. We hear a lot of these kinds of efforts happening. You know, are they real is the question.
And he concludes, wait to see what money they raise and candidates they attract. And more importantly, the real challenge is, for this new effort, is to qualify to get on the ballot in every state. That will take a boatload of money, time, and volunteers willing to do the legwork, not to mention the possible legal challenges from the 2 majority parties along the way.
If it were easy to get on the ballot in 50 states, there'd be a whole lot of people on the ballot. It's not. This is a really, really difficult process.
Mr. Upton says he will not be one of the candidates for president, but there are some other possibilities on the list. Maverick Democratic U.S. Senator Joe Manchin, the former governor of Maryland Larry Hogan, who has good bipartisan chops, and former Democratic turned independent U.S. Senator Kyrsten Sinema. A nominating convention for this new party is already set for November 15th in Dallas, if this turns out to be the real deal.
Well, we're going to talk to Tim a little bit later in the show, but this story made us curious, so we reached out to one of the founders of No Labels to do a deeper dive. We started by asking Holly Page about the group's plans for 2024.
No Labels has done the hard work to create an infrastructure for a potential third choice. We are listening to the American people, and what they're telling us is they do not want a rematch of 2020. They want something different. They want a conversation about the future. And so we are laying the groundwork. We're getting ballot access, organizing citizens. In fact, if anybody would like to be a part of this, I encourage you to come to our website. And then we will see what happens. So it really is an antithesis to so much of what we are being offered now in the political conversation, which I liken to being promised that we can eat ice cream all day long and not get fat. I think common sense politics are about the American people understanding it's a big country. There's a lot of different interests. If we can come together and get 80% of what we all want, rather than 100%, we'll all be the better for it. The incentives really reward division and adherence to party loyalty. They discourage problem solving and talking with the other side, let alone actually compromising. And it's one of the reasons why No Labels was created. We challenge that incentive structure. But I think when you look at a lot of recent news reports that have independent, the number of Americans who identify as politically independent at like 49% and rising, they're telling us something. That they don't want to, they want to abstain from the culture wars. They don't want to have to choose between Fox and MSNBC. They just want their community safe, their kids to go to good schools, jobs, opportunity, clean air to breathe. We need more ideas, right? We need more modern ideas. We need more innovations. And that's really what we're looking for. Believe it or not, I hope to be out of business. We feel like we have to advance the interests of so many folks who are raising their families or, working hard, taking care of parents, whatever it is. They can't really be present in Washington and make sure that their voice is included in the political conversations. And that's really what we're trying to do. But if the parties evolve, modernize, start to talk about the future, start to talk about the things that really keep our voters up at night, worried, then there'll be no need for us and we can all go and do other things.
Coming up next on The Rundown, we'll talk about the week that was in Michigan politics. So stay tuned for Tim's Take when The Rundown returns. To check in on Michigan politics with Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic. Turns out there's not as much money in the state's budget as we thought. So we're going to start with Tim's take on that potential third party.
Efforts are underway, as we reported earlier, to create the common sense political party in Michigan that would not put candidates on the ballot, but would actually try to pick candidates by changing state law. This is a little complicated, but to make a long story short, basically, if the Supreme Court signs off on this, because what the common sense people who are sort of maverick, used to be Republicans that want to go to this other option to give you more options at the ballot box, they're going to be challenged by either the R's or the D's or both. So this issue, everybody in town pretty much agrees that the so-called fusion party will be decided by the state Supreme Court. If the court says they can go ahead and do this, basically, they'll put some candidates and give endorsements to candidates, but under different party labels. It's very complicated. And real difficult for voters to understand, but it's not a done deal yet. They will go before the State Board of Canvassers to get the petition language approved. Then they have to get 45,000 signatures to actually create this third party, and then they have to go through the legal maneuvering to make sure they can put some people on the ballot. It's a new idea. It basically grows out of the people in the Republican Party who are no longer Republicans or upset with their party, trying to find other alternatives for you, the voters. So stay tuned on this one. It's not a done deal. State bean counters met this week, and when they added up the numbers, they report that the state is short some $3 billion. And so the major question is, what the heck happened to the budget? Why did that money disappear? Well, the administration explains it's due basically to tax relief for senior citizens, tax relief for the needy families in the state, and the rollback of the state income tax rate to a lower level. When you put all of those numbers together, they add up to $3 billion. The administration says, however, if you take those tax cuts out of the equation, state revenues in the state are actually at the level they were before the pandemic. And so, according to the administration, everything is just hunky-dory when it comes to the budget. But as a lot of other issues are in this town divided, yes, this one is too, because some of the Republicans are saying, wait a second. If we're losing $3 billion, we can't be spending all of this money on all of the governor's programs, and we need to do a little belt tightening because in the out years after this year, the state may not have the revenue because the revenue growth is not there. So there's an economic disagreement here as to what to do about the $3 billion shortfall. Is it a problem or is it not? The administration says not. Some Republicans say 'tis. Welcome to my world.
All right, thank you, Tim. Stay tuned. We'll put a bow on the show in just a couple of minutes. If you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, we've got just the thing. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at the screen right now. This will take you to the sign-up page, or you can head to WLNS.com/newsletter. And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown.